Hi everyone, and welcome to my talk on DevOps in Salesforce. My name is Matt Bradley Roberts, and I've been working with the wonderful world of Salesforce now for nearly 9 years, and I'm a senior technical architect. And today, just going to be talking a little bit about DevOps and what we need to be thinking about, I guess, in the new world of everyone working from home. So let me move on to my introductory slide. So 2020, it was the year that COVID hit the world. It spread across, and everyone will always remember this year as the year that COVID hit. So one outcome was a shift in our understanding of how delivery can be improved, and how actually we're going to be working from home a lot more. And that's not just here in the UK, that's across the entire globe. So as we move into 2021, I think we should be looking to not only improve kind of the normal metrics of cost savings and efficiencies, but also actually how those remote teams can work together in a really consistent way, and achieve, as it says here, a high level of quality. In other words, and this is stealing the government's phrase, what does the new normal for digital delivery look like? And I think really a large part of that is going to come in the form of DevOps. So DevOps is, or DevSecOps as it's now becoming known, is a very fashionable buzzword. It's used in a lot of sales to differentiate one offering from another. People see it as the way forwards for quality, but really it's a whole way of working, and even a mindset that can really change and improve the way that we work together, especially now we are less likely to be meeting up and doing things in person and having that interaction in a real-time manner. DevOps will allow us to work closer while still being remote. So there are 4 metrics commonly used to measure, and this can be used to measure any process. This isn't just for DevOps, this is for any kind of delivery. Those are the lead time, which is how long it takes for work to be delivered to the end users. How frequently you can actually update your production environment. How often that goes wrong. So how often those updates actually make things break, and the end user is affected. And then a time to restore. So how quickly you can recover from one of those failures. Now, DevOps, as you can see from the infinity picture here, really focuses on 6 main points. It's a planning stage initially, then actually doing some sort of creation or build, verifying that or testing that, deploying that to various environments in your pipeline, releasing it to production and letting the users get their hands on it, and then a monitoring phase as well, where if there are issues, bugs can be raised and fed back into that planning phase so you get the next iteration. Now, traditionally, I think, especially within the Salesforce world, people focus very heavily on the dev side. So it's all about planning, creating, testing, and then there's kind of a throwaway, okay, now let's get it live. And very rarely ops taken into account, even in the sense that we can have situations where stuff gets changed directly onto production, which breaks operations and end users complain. And actually, it's just a bit of a mess. So the whole DevOps way of working, the life cycle, the thought process behind it, really embeds quality. It embeds a reproducible and repeatable process that allows quality to be driven, and hopefully get rid of some of those major faux pas where something gets changed and things break and no one can return from that point, the whole rollback scenario. So with that in mind, and I say it's not just a buzzword because it is definitely still a buzzword, and actually there's no harm in that. If you're wanting to sell your process and say how efficient and how high quality you can do that, using the DevOps word is actually completely acceptable. So I'm not saying don't use it as a marketing buzzword, and a lot of people definitely will. But what I'm saying is it's not just a buzzword. There is something substantial behind it. So I have a quick look at the figures that back this up. So this set of numbers on the screen right now kind of highlight to me why we would bother with DevOps. So there was a report, the State of DevOps, back in 2019, which showed the following metrics. That using DevOps, you are 208 times more frequent with your code deployments. You are generally 106 times faster to get your changes into production. The time to recover is the real staggering one, 2,604 times faster. And this is not specific to Salesforce, I should say at this point, because there are some interesting issues in particular with Salesforce, especially around recovery, but we'll look into that shortly. And as well as that, 7 times less likely to break stuff. So you are 1 in 7 times as likely to fail with the DevOps stuff in place. So you can see just from those figures there that there is a real benefit in business turnaround, in cost savings, in efficiency, in all those other things, in quality, less failures. And actually the biggest one for me is that the difference in this way of working is the 106 times faster. In the world we live in, things are changing on a day-to-day basis. You just have to look at how often we're getting updates on the latest world situations. Stuff moves on, and it moves on very quickly. So the quicker you can get a change into your production system, the more likely it is to still be of value and not to have moved on into something else and changed. So actually, the quicker you can get things into production, normally, the more useful it's going to be and the more value the end user will get from it. So some interesting stats there. As I say, these are not specific to Salesforce. It's worth noting that for sure. But I think they're probably mirrored relatively closely in the Salesforce world as well. So having said all that, I am now going to dig slightly deeper into the wonderful world of Salesforce and look at what I have labeled as the good, the bad, and the ugly in terms of DevOps within Salesforce. So Salesforce, obviously this talk is geared mainly towards developers and admins, but some of the things here will be very obvious to you guys, some maybe not quite so much. And I will explain some of my acronyms as we go as well. So Salesforce metadata and code can be stored in a version control system, or VCS. So that's your Git, and there are many others, but Git is the one that is highly recommended, but something that will keep a record of all the changes you've made over time and keep a version of that, which helps with the rollback and the recovering from failure. Salesforce Developer Experience came out a few years ago, SFDX, and it provides really good tools, command line tools to use with DevOps in terms of deployment and automation. So actually a lot of the hard work has already been done. There are also many tools out there specifically for automated deployment, testing, and monitoring in Salesforce. So the wonderful App Exchange, there are absolutely loads of choice out there for things you're looking for. Actually, some of them are our sponsors for London Schooling. So just look at the logos on my last page, but there are others out there definitely as well. But yeah, there are many, many tools that are available right now to use for some of these things. And also Salesforce themselves have Salesforce DevOps Center, which they've been talking about for a good year or two. And I've recently checked the community chatter groups, and the beta is in release from next month. So hopefully that will actually be coming soon. So that's the good. And there is a lot of good, and there is a lot of excellent wins you can get right now in Salesforce in the DevOps world that will vastly improve your quality, your repeatable processes, your adherence to coding standards, and your adherence to testing and automation, so that you can get into a really slick way of delivering. Then we move on to the bad, and sadly there are still some things, but there is even some good messaging behind this. So not everything can actually be deployed safely via the metadata API at the moment. I think of things like connected apps, Previously, things like communities couldn't be, although now they are. Experience bundles are available. So Salesforce are making changes to make this more easy as we go along. Most of the tools focus on dev and they don't give many benefits to the ops team. But if you have ever worked in some sort of operations or support role, then there are some things out there that are available, but the majority of the tools focus heavily on the dev side. Salesforce Locker service, and I'm sure there'll be a few developers listening to this that will chuckle, but it can block and confuse some automated testing tools. It's known to be a bit of an issue, and there are ways around it, but it's just something to be aware of. And generally, Salesforce DevOps is still largely immature. Actually, if you look at the trailheads, for example, there's a few around DevOps, and there are loads around change sets and packaging and deployment best practice. And a lot of it actually currently still ignores DevOps as a way of doing delivery. And then we have the downright ugly. If you've worked in a consulting space or even as a ISV and you're trying to sell some of these products, the cost is often seen as prohibitive. So people think, I don't want to invest in the time or the tools. There's lots of free stuff out there. We can use change sets, we can use packages. So why would we invest in a DevOps setup when it's going to take either a lot of time or it's going to spend a lot of money that we can't really afford? Well, I guess just quickly to mention on this one, if you look back at some of those statistics I put up earlier, the cost savings that you'll get when you actually implement this will more than normally pay for these costs in time or money. Declarative changes directly in production. Now, if there's any admins watching this and you are someone who goes in and makes changes directly into production, you are the people I'm speaking to. So it's absolutely considered okay to do, and Salesforce encourage often changes to be made directly into production. However, there needs to be an awareness of the knock-on effect of doing that. On a project I've been working on recently, for example, changes made directly in production are great and they make the lives better for the end user almost immediately. But if that's not fed back into that DevOps loop, then the next time something is deployed, it could easily just overwrite that change and you'll be back to exactly where you were. So as to avoid those kind of regression bugs, it needs to be fed back in. There's nothing wrong with making changes directly in production, so long as it's fed back into the loop and not missed. So the next time that a deployment's made, it just gets overridden. That can be very ugly. I've seen it firsthand. The way that Salesforce stores metadata is using XML. And actually the nodes that build up the XML sometimes move around between API versions. So we're currently in Spring 21. Even between Winter 21 and Spring 21, there have been changes, fundamental changes to the metadata XML on certain settings, on objects, and some permissions come and go. And actually that can cause some issues. So it's something to be aware of, more than an absolute nightmare, but just that movement can cause interesting merge conflicts in your version control systems. And then one of the biggest things right now is we are seeing more and more multi-cloud solutions. And actually, whilst SFDX is fantastic for the core Salesforce platform or salesforce.com, you have to consider MuleSoft, Marketing Cloud, Commerce Cloud, Salesforce Industries, formerly known as Velocity. And actually, some of these are now supported, but a lot of them still aren't. And there is no good DevOps solutions out there for some of these platforms. So whilst Salesforce is rightly expanding its clouds, expanding its offerings, it's having a knock-on effect to things like DevOps, where you need to consider how you can best roll out these same delivery techniques and methodologies to these different clouds. So lots to consider. And actually, I guess, once again, I wanted to reiterate the good. There's a lot of good out there, and Salesforce are working very, very hard, including with their Salesforce DevOps Center, to make this easier for everyone, to make it the standard practice and to make it the way that we should be doing delivery going forwards. There are huge benefits. And not only that, I guess the next slide really sums up how life used to be for a lot of us, and probably still is for a good portion. Developers traditionally write some code and throw it over the fence to ops to deal with, often with the phrase of, well, here's some code, good luck, or more often than not, it worked on my machine. And there's a real danger in working in this way. You're not going to make any friends in the ops teams, but also the biggest knock-on effect is to the end user. Any piece of software or any application that gets written in Salesforce, the sole purpose of that is to make the life of the end user better. If you're doing this kind of pull the pin and throw it over, you run a high risk of making it worse for the end user. And actually, if you're doing that, why do it at all? You know, the end goal must be to make the life of the end user better, to introduce automation, to make their jobs easier. And if we're doing this kind of pull the pin and throw mentality, we're not fulfilling that primary purpose of the software, or more often than not, we're not. So just something really to consider. It's a change in mindset. It's a change in our way of working. We work much more closely with the ops team, because actually they'll start to like us a bit more when we stop breaking their stuff. But also they can then feed back into the process, and it all flows much more smoothly. So I guess the question here is, DevOps, why bother? Well, yeah, you can say there's going to be cost savings. You can say there's going to be time savings. You can say the statistics show X, Y, or Z. But the biggest thing for me is that the end user is going to get a better experience, because you will get the changes to them quicker. You will get better quality output at the end. And actually, the developers who are doing this work will enjoy it more, because it's so much easier to work in this way. And you get the results to the end user much, much quicker, without having to do a whole load of manual stuff. So DevOps, it's not just a buzzword. It's genuinely a way of working. It's a change in mindset. But I think there is real benefit, especially now we're in this distributed global situation of people working often from home in stressful situations with dogs barking and family asking them to do things. Actually, if we can all work in a way where automation through DevOps will do a lot of the hard work and the heavy lifting for us, then it's got to be a better end result. And it also doesn't matter. It doesn't care what time of day you're pushing things through the code system. It will still pick up those changes and move them through the pipeline. If you're waiting for your package administrator or someone to create change sets and move them for you, it's never going to be as slick, and it's not going to be as flexible for you in terms of work-life balance. So there are some real benefits to doing DevOps. And I think the more and more people that adopt this way of working, the more Salesforce improve what they're doing, the better it's going to be for everyone. And I, for one, am looking forwards to the way that 2021 shows us that digital delivery can now be done in a much more remote fashion and still maintain really good quality for the end user. So think end user, don't throw a grenade at your ops team, and enjoy the wonderful world of DevOps within Salesforce. So thank you ever so much. That's everything from me. I hope you've enjoyed the talk.